Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Next Door NetAdmin. Have you ever thought about the fun of installing Microsoft Office across an entire fleet of computers? Previously, like a decade ago now, uh, it was all provided as an MSI file, a Microsoft installer. So you had all the files handy that you could just throw in a network share and point everybody on the network to go install it out of there, whether through group policy or a logon script or whatever. But then Microsoft started to change that. And instead of having Office install from a Microsoft installer, they instituted something called click to run. Can also be abbreviated CTR, or C2R is something that I see a lot. There were a couple of technical reasons behind this that I'm not going to get into too much depth today. Better compatibility with AppV mostly, but regardless, now what you have, considering how frequently they're updating Office, is it's just a setup file that you're supposed to download or have each of your users download out of Office 365, run it, and it'll just download and install Office. Cool. But if you have this one executable file, this means that every single computer you're installing on has to download 4, 5, 6 gigabytes worth of Office files to install it for every computer. I mean, bandwidth may be cheap, but that's not really how we'd like to be able to do this. Also, how do we customize this? How do we make sure that everybody has, what they need in terms of standardized settings? How do we know that everybody's using the right update channel? How do we know all of this stuff? How do we do this in a better way, essentially? It may not come as a surprise that Microsoft has some tools to facilitate this. The trick is knowing where they are and knowing how to use them. So that's what I'm going to show you today. I'm going to get started by just bringing up the very first thing. This is the Microsoft Download Center. You've got something called the Office Deployment Tool. It's a command line tool that you use to download and deploy click-to-run versions of Office. Cool. This is what we want. It's tiny. It's only 3.6 megabytes. What is this? It's a self-extracting executable file, which contains the Office Deployment Tool executable, setup.exe, and sample configuration XML files. What does this look like? When you actually bring it up, it looks something like this. It doesn't have the Teams directory. That's an add-in that I've put in there. It doesn't include this setup Teams or this which.txt file. Again, those are mine. And it doesn't include any of those. It'll just include something like configuration Office 365 x64.xml. And that's all you get. Knowing what to do with this, well, you're the administrator. You're supposed to already know what to do with that. What does it look like? Well, it looks a lot like this. This is install Office Business 64.xml, which is this file right here. It's got a configuration ID. It's got an info description. It's got a whole bunch of crap. You can see I've got some exclude apps. There's a product ID, there's some property names, there's app settings, there's user keys, there's a whole bunch of stuff. And it's not especially easy to read, even when you know what you're looking at. So what is this? How do you make something like this? It used to be that lucky admins like me had to create this by scratch and by hand, which was an adventure, shall we say? But fortunately, these days, Microsoft has created a web-based tool Similar to the Office deployment tool, it's the Office customization tool. You'll note this is on the Microsoft 365 Apps Admin Center, but you do not need to be signed into a 365 account in order to use this. You can use this whether you're using Office 365 or whether you're using an LTSC version like Office 2021 or Office 2024. And you can start with products and releases. Are you doing a 32-bit or a 64-bit system? Make your choice. What products do you want to deploy? There's several options here. How do you know which of these you want? Quite honestly, I'm going to say if you're using something like Office 2019, 2021, or 2024, you should already know which one of these you've got, whether it's standard or professional plus, what have you. But for these, how do you know what the difference is between Microsoft 365 apps for enterprise or Microsoft 365 apps for business? Or the no Teams variants? What are these? Because not all of Microsoft's licenses are explainable for things like that. You might have an E3 license. You might have an F3 license. You might have a Microsoft A license. You might have the old business standard or business premium or all of the, what is it? How do we know? This is where I have to go and look up a list of product IDs that are supported by the Office deployment tool for Click to Run. And it'll say right up at the top, it includes Pro Plus Retail. You can do Business Retail, Visio Project, Access, and various language packs. And you can get more configuration options if you want. But here's the plan names and the correct product ID to use for that plan. And this is important because if you use the wrong product ID, you can't activate Office. So if you install Pro Plus and then try to activate Business Retail, nothing doing. So you can see Microsoft Apps for Enterprise. This says Office 365 Pro Plus EEA No Teams Retail. Well, this is actually true if you're doing the no Teams variant. If you're doing the regular variant with Teams, it's just Pro Plus Retail. If you're using Office 365 Enterprise E3 or E5, those are both Pro Plus. If you're using apps for business or business standard or business premium, these are business retail. It's all laid out right here. And you can actually see that when you select this for Office Business 64, this is the product ID that you've got, business retail. And I put it in my description field here. This is for business premium licensing. I have another one here for E3 licensing. This is the O365 Pro Plus retail product ID. So that's what you're going to be selecting. Figure out what license you've got, whether it needs to be with Teams or without Teams. The choice is yours. I will say that in this section, with Teams is actually going to be a per user installation of Teams, not a per machine version of Teams. If you want a per machine version of Teams, that's done in another fashion, which is what I've actually got. But going back to customization here for the moment, let's say we're going to go with E3 licensing. We know that that's going to be apps for enterprise. Cool. I'm not going to bother with Visio. I'm not going to bother with project, and I'm not going to worry about language packs or the access runtime. If I wanted those, I could include those. Update channels. What is this? Current channel, preview, monthly enterprise, semi-annual. What is this? How is this defined? Well, here's an overview of update channels for Microsoft 365 apps. really the two preview versions are for beta testing. If you want your customers or your users to be beta testers, you're free to do that. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it from the typical network administrator perspective of wanting stability. But broadly speaking, current channel, monthly enterprise, and semi-annual enterprise. Here's the recommended use. Current channel gives you new features as soon as they're ready on no set schedule. You have no idea when things are going to change. It might be day to day, it might be week to week. You might have an update that moves your buttons in your toolbar on Tuesday, and then on Friday, you might have something that reorganizes the buttons in another way or adds new menus or changes your menus. That's a lot of chaos. This is why I don't like the new Office where everything's changing all the time. Semi-annual enterprise is for non-human devices and those running specialized or business critical workloads that require extensive testing. This is for compliance with regulatory and organizational standards. If that's what you need, choose the semi-annual enterprise channel. That will be twice a year in January and July. That's when it'll get feature updates. It'll get bug fixes once a month, standard, patch frequency, but the feature updates will only be twice a year. And it's supported for 14 months. But in between those, in between the update whenever we feel like it with whatever we've got, whether it's ready or not, and the twice a year only, please, for non-human devices and regulatory compliance, in the middle, you get monthly enterprise channel. You get the new features, but it's only once a month, and it's only on the second Tuesday of the month, the regular patch Tuesday. This is more predictable for your users. Windows update, Office updated at the same time. If you've got new features, you've got new features. And unfortunately, that's just life in Microsoft's new world. They change everything and you just live with it. It's supported for 2 months for any given version, so you do need to make sure you are rolling forward on a regular basis. But this is essentially the middle ground between whenever you feel like it and a very specialized regulatory compliance regime. And so generally speaking, I would choose monthly enterprise channel. If we go back to the configuration file, you can see that the channel is monthly enterprise for this Office Client Edition. And you can see also that I've chosen 64-bit. You can start to see how your selections will be rendered in the configuration file. The version, the latest version, yes, fine. Apps, what do you want to have? In this case, Groove. Do we need Groove? Who uses Groove? OneDrive Desktop, people use that. Skype for Business, that's a dead product. That's going away. Teams, this is the user installed version of Teams rather than the machine installed version. We might take that out. Outlook Classic, yeah, fine. Background service for Microsoft Search and Bing. No, not interested. And those choices you can also see reflected here. Groove, no. Link, no. Link was the Skype for Business actual app name. Teams, no. Bing, no. These are all the things that we have excluded. And if we wanted to exclude other parts of the package, we could just by toggling them, and it'll exclude that application from being installed. Language. Well, the primary language for a lot of people will be English, United States. There's other choices available. Match operating system, if you want. In Canada, cool, the operating system should be set to English Canadian. They don't have a language for English Canadian. They do have French Canada because that's a very different version of French from French in France. But English Canada, your choice may vary. If you want to go with the UK spelling, you can choose that. A lot of people will still just choose English US because it's, if you're working with folks in the US, it, reduces the incident rate of questions. You can add additional languages if you want. If you want to add additional proofing tools because you're working with some documents in Spanish or French or what have you, you can add those here as well. Your installation. Where do you want to deploy Office from? Office Content Delivery Network. If you do this, this is going to deploy your installation from the internet every single time. You'll just have a configuration file, and then when you run the deployment tool, it'll download from the internet every time it wants to install onto everybody's computer. We'd like to avoid that if we can. I'd like to be able to store the installation files on a server so that if I'm installing to 20 computers, I only have to download it once, and then I can install locally to everything else. So in that case, local source, choose a source path, and typically you would permit fallback to the content delivery network if you happen to need something that wasn't downloaded. Maybe one machine, you finish installing it and then you go, oh, but this person's also going to need language files for doing proofing in Spanish, and it's not something that I downloaded for everybody to use. You want them to be able to go online to get that if you need to add something later. Your source path can be a network, local, or HTTP path. You can put in whatever path you want. If you take a look here, you'll see that I've actually got a network location that I would say, I want to put it on this server in an installs share, and I'm going to put it in a folder, Microsoft 365 Apps for Business. Or if this was the E3 licensing, I would say Microsoft 365 Apps for Enterprise. Allow CDN fallback is true. There you go. This is important because when you go and download the files, it'll check this path, and then it will save the downloaded files to that path. And when you do the installation, it will look in that path for the files to install. So, show installation to user on or off. This actually controls the display level at the bottom here. If the display level is full, then you see the user interface as it's installing. You can also uncheck that, and that will change the display level to none. Pretty sure it's none. It might be never, but I'm pretty sure it's none. And when that happens, there's no installation window whatsoever. If you're in a command prompt window, it'll just be doing its thing, and it'll look like the computer's hung, even though it's doing stuff in the background. Why is this useful? This is useful if you're doing a silent installation. If you're installing something behind the scenes and you want the user to be able to continue using the computer, or if you have other things that are going on in the foreground, this allows it to run in the background and you don't need to be bothered with the display window for it. Cool. So that's an option. Shut down running applications. If somebody's using it, kill the Office applications before you run this. Typically speaking, I'll enable that because I'm not running this on a computer where somebody's using Office. I'm usually running this on brand new computers, so I don't care if it's going to try and shut down other applications because that makes a lot of sense to me. And yeah, force app shutdown will be true in that case. Cool. Moving on. Update and upgrade. Where do I want to deploy updates from? This is one where I will typically leave the online Office Content Delivery Network checked. When I am doing updates every single month, I don't necessarily want to have to remember that, hey, I have to go and download the updates every single month or else none of my computers are going to get Office updates. Much the same way as I'm doing Windows updates directly from the internet, I want to do Office updates directly from the internet. And I say this explicitly because if you are using something like Windows Server Update services to locally cache your Windows updates, you're probably going to do the same thing for your Office updates. So you'll want to adjust the settings comparably to make sure you're matching whatever you're doing with your Windows updates. But for most people, that'll just be from the internet. Really, all I'm trying to do here is make sure that everybody installs with the same settings and that the installation doesn't have to download everything every single time. Updates are smaller. I'm okay with them getting that from online. Automatically check for updates? Yes. Uninstall any MSI versions of Office, including Visio and Project? Yes. I mean, you don't have to, but it's probably better for people that you do so that they don't have multiple versions and try to figure out, okay, am I using Word 2016 or Word from Office 365? Okay, one version only. We don't need to confuse the users. But you can also say, hey, I've got an old version of Visio that I really want to keep because I'm not installing Visio from 365. Okay, so maybe you don't want to uninstall Visio. Maybe you don't want to uninstall Project either. You can customize it as you wish. If you want you for anything that you uninstall, you can install the same language. You can do an automatic upgrade. Again, typically I'm not going to select either of those because I'm doing brand new installations. Automatically accept the license terms. Yes, please. I don't want to have to force every single user to accept this. And if I'm deploying it silently, then waiting to continue the installation until they accept the terms of service when you can't actually see the terms of service would be a little bit of a problem. So this is just accept the EULA true. The administrator has accepted the license agreement on behalf of the user. Cool. Product activation, user-based, very typical. If you're using Office 365 licensing, the license is applied per user. If you're doing shared computer licensing or device-based licensing, you can do that. Up to you. That's a little more advanced. And for those, you're on your own for the moment. General, your organization name to set the company property on Office documents. This is just really simply your customer business name. Cool. Put that in there if you want, and don't put it in there if you don't want. The description for documentation purposes, that's just the description right up here at the top. Put in what you want so that you know what it is when you look at it later. Application preferences. This is all the stuff that you can tweak in your automated installation. And I've got some settings right here, like send customer data, show first run opt-in, cube enable. What's this? This is enable customer experience improvement program. So let's see here. If I do first run, here's some of the options that are available. Disable opt-in wizard on first run. If you enable it, it doesn't show the wizard the first time they launch it. It just goes straight into the application. Most of the time, I don't want people to see the opt-in wizard because I don't want them to go into all of this stuff. I know how I want these machines configured. So I will say, am I disabling the opt-in wizard? Yes, I am. Okay. That's all you need to do. Now the status is configured. And when you disable the opt-in wizard, it ends up looking like this. Here's your option to disable the opt-in wizard. And the value is 1 because it's enabled. And if I'm doing the customer experience improvement program, and I click on that, there we go. Am I going to enable the customer experience improvement program? Maybe I'm going to say false. Okay, now it's configured, and when I export it, it'll be Am I enabling the customer experience improvement program? No, I'm not. The value is 0. So you can do a lot of these things. Outlook search. If you don't have Windows search installed, it'll prompt the user, hey, do you want to download and install the search? A lot of the times the users may not have admin rights to install something like that. So I'm just going to disable the prompt altogether so that they're not prompted to try and do something that they can't do. A weather bar. In this case, not something we want the users to have to deal with. Disable it. You can. There's a lot of things you can go into here. They're there for you to set things according to policy. There's a big temptation sometimes, and I'm speaking from experience, to go through everything and try and set everything up just the way you want. Where possible, let the users decide for themselves. Try to only hit the big things that are important from a policy or security perspective. It doesn't really matter if somebody wants to see screen tips when they hover over commands. There's nothing that says, hey, I want to disable this so that nobody gets these help tips. And there's also something where if you enable it and mandate that these options are selectable, okay, but what if somebody wants to turn them off? There's a problem with over specifying settings as well as under specifying them. So these are here, they are very useful. Try not to go hog wild with them because that can be problematic. And then when you're done and you have everything set up the way that you want it, you can just hit export. It'll ask you what default file format you want to set. Typically, I'll just say keep current settings. I don't need to change this. If you want to set it to Office Open XML format, this is the Microsoft standard that they've been trying to push for open formats. You can also set it to use open document formats. The ODF format is something that everybody else in the world set up to make sure that you could exchange documents between things like Microsoft and OpenOffice or LibreOffice or any of the others. Microsoft did the typical thing. They said, well, here's the standard that everybody else has agreed to. We want to push our own thing, Office Open XML. Okay. Choose what works for you. You don't have to mandate either of these. You can just keep the current settings. And in this case, it's not configured, so just go with it. When you click OK, you have to actually accept the terms of the software license because there wasn't a checkbox before. You do that, you call it whatever you want. You can just leave it as configuration. When you hit export, it downloads it. Easy. You'll get a file that looks a lot like this. That's just how it is. So how do you actually use this XML file now that you have it? Well, that's the question, isn't it? If we open up a command prompt, oops. Of course you can't do that because I didn't put the backslash in front of it. There we go. All right, in ctemp, the temp file where I've put this in, and actually I've got it in Microsoft 365 apps for enterprise or business. And then I just modify the directory name according to what I'm doing at any given point in time. If you run setup, you can say download, and then one of the install files that you have. In this case, if I try using this one right now, I don't have a network path. So maybe I don't want to put it in a network path. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy my directory that I'm in right now. like so. Cool. Then I'm going to save that. So when it goes to download, this is the directory that it will download into. So setup/download, install Office Business 64, off you go. It doesn't look like it's doing anything, does it? But if you go into your temp file, you can see there's now an Office directory that wasn't there before. There's a data, there's cabinet files, there's a version number, there's files that are being downloaded here. This one looks like it's currently at 0 kilobytes, but that's because it's still downloading. If we stay on this screen, you will see that as it continues its download, that will update, and then it will start downloading a language file as well. This download can take a little bit of time. This machine is on a fast connection, so I don't expect it to take all that long, but it is a particular amount of time. This is the time that you're saving by doing the download once and only once, and then everybody else can just install from your server. And you can see that that was, a 2.5 gigabyte file just on its own. If we go back and take a look at what else it's doing, doesn't seem to be doing anything else. What's it doing right now? Right now, it's probably checksumming it to make sure that it got everything correctly, because now it's spat more files in here, and now it's working on the language file. Cool. That's wonderful. Here's some more data. Here's some catalogs to make sure that everything checks out okay. And now it has completed. Now we've downloaded everything for our customized installation of Office, and it's ready to go. If I wanted to now install this, I would use the same setup file, and I would use the same XML, but I would say /configure instead. Download just pulls it down off the internet. That you do once. Then on each of your stations, you run the configure command, and it will use that XML file to configure the software using the source that was set up here. It'll say, okay, so this is where I'm configuring it from. These are my source files. Let's install it, set it all up, and make sure that it's exactly as we want it to be. Okay, cool. And you'll notice we haven't had to put in any sort of license key here because this is from Office 365. The licensing is in Office 365. We haven't had to put anything in to download the source installer files either. You can do this even if you don't have a license assigned, because as an administrator, maybe you don't have a license assigned. You're just the administrator. You're not an actual user using the software. So this can be used whether or not you've got a license. If you were in the customization tool and you used something like Office LTSC Standard 2021, let's say, with a volume license. Okay. You only have one update channel because only one exists for Office 2021. You don't have necessarily Teams or Groove or Skype for Business in here. That wasn't included in Office 2021. Your licensing and activation, it may be user-based. There's a key here. If you want to use KMS licensing, that comes built in. If you're going to use a multiple activation key, you can actually put the key in here so that it's in your configuration file, and then everybody's software just activates automatically. So this tool will work for a lot of different product releases of Office. And when you export it, you'll get a configuration file that does what you need it to do. And this process remains the same. /download with the XML file pulls it down off the internet so that it's ready to install. /configure configures it on your computer, the computer where you're running it anyway. And then how you have it run that command is up to you. Again, you could do it in a login script. You could do it in group policy. You could do it as a standard batch file that's run as part of your first run commands through an automated installation through unattend.xml. The choices are yours, so long as it runs the command and can actually access it. Now, of course, if you try and tell it to use ctemp, well, that's only going to work if it's actually on that computer's temp folder, on that computer's C drive. So that's where you might choose instead to have a server path, so that wherever the computer is on the network, it's going to a single server location. So just be sure that you have your source path set up correctly so that it knows where it's trying to get it from. Beyond that, Teams, if you have, if you want to do the per machine install of Teams, I'm not going to go too in depth on this because I don't want to take up too much time, but there's a Teams bootstrapper.exe that you can download, and then an MSIX that you can download that actually includes the per machine installation of MS Teams. And then when you're actually running that, it's pretty simple. You can just run Teams bootstrapper.exe with a couple of arguments that tells it where the MSIX file is, and you're off to the races. And that can be, you know, a little something that you add on as a separate step rather than having Teams install as part of Office, and then every single user who logs onto the computer has to install Teams separately. Better to just install it once for the entire machine and everybody can use it. Cool. So that's pretty much all that I have for you today. Hopefully this has been interesting, useful to you. If you have any thoughts on other things that you can do with the tool, or thoughts on other things that you want to see me talk about later, feel free to let me know right down there in the comments section. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching. I am your next door NetAdmin, and we will see you next time.